the city is situated is the traditional territory of the Wolastoqiyik, along with their indigenous neighbors, the Mi'kmaq and the Pescatawamukati, signed peace and friendship treaties with the British Crown in the 1700s that protected their rights to lands and resources. Let us pause and reflect.
Okay, City Clerk, over to you for the next item.
Thank you, Your Worship. The first item on the agenda is 2.1, and this is for the minutes of November the 1st.
Okay, I need we've got Councillor Hickey and Councillor Killen for the minutes of November 1st. On the question, all in favor? Contrary minded? Motion carried. Thank you. Next item, City Clerk.
Next item is the approval of the agenda, and we have a few additions. There are two additions being requested. They're for ticket event purchases for nonprofit events, and they were emailed to council earlier, but number 16.1 would be Sophia Recovery Center breakfast, and 16.2 would be Prude Cultural Diversity Awards. Also, we have two items that came from Committee of the Whole recommendations. One is 17.1, which would be City Market Lease document, and 17.2 would be Sale of Land Industrial Park.
Thank you. Can I get a motion to on the question? All in favor? Contrary minded? Motion carried. Next item, City Clerk.
Next is disclosures of conflict of interest, if there are any.
You're not hearing any disclosures of conflict of interest, so we'll move on to the next item, please.
Next item is the consent agenda.
Thank you. Over to you, Deputy.
Thank you, Worship. I would move 5.1 through to 5.9.
I'll get a seconder on that, Councillor Sullivan, and on the question, I have Councillor Radwan first, please.
Thank you, Mayor Reardon. I wanted to speak to a couple of items, and I have a question on one. Actually, a couple questions on both of them, 5.3 and 5.5. So the traffic paint purchase, I was so happy to see that staff are trying to do some new things to save money and to save time. And I was just curious, maybe Commissioner Hugenholtz can speak to it, but if any of the new procedures that you were trying for the tapes, plastic, or alternative sprayable compounds has actually worked efficiently, and obviously, this, is there anything that other cities are doing that that we should look at as well?
Thank you, Councillor or Deputy Commissioner Hugenholtz. Over to you, please.
Thank you, through you, Your Worship, to the councillor. At this point in time, we have some installation, some test areas that we've done. We continue to monitor those for wear, but we're not at the point now where we've identified a real scalable alternative to the paint that's being recommended here this evening.
Okay, so that's great. And I did also want to talk to 5.5, the unsightly premises on Rossey Road. So I did say today that I got a call from the daughter of the owner of the property, and they had been trying to clear out the property. It was a very emotional phone call, and they've been trying to clear everything out. I do recognize that this is the third time that the city has looked at helping clean up this property. She had called requesting to have more time and to be able to keep the shingles on the property. You know, I asked if they had anywhere to store it, and I don't think that they do, but I did say that I would share this. And I also kind of reiterated the fact that city staff do give citizens time to try to get this sort of thing resolved. She mentioned that the last load that they took to the dump was 3.9 tons. Anyway, I said, you know, I feel very badly. And then I started to really reflect and realize that city staff are dealing with residents that are having some challenging, obviously, with hoarding. And getting rid of their things can be very traumatic. So my question is, I mean, obviously city staff are not, you know, they're there to try to look after getting things out of the property so that things are safe. But do they have a list of resources that they can refer people to, for example, grief centers or such, when people are getting emotional and having a hard time dealing with this?
That would go over to Chris McKeel, but I think that is probably out of our scope. I mean, it's also traumatic for the neighbors that live next door, and we've heard so much of that. So I think, like, we have charged them to do this. We have a process that we follow, and that's ends sort of there for us. So if you have that request to clean up your property and it doesn't happen, then that sets the wheels in motion, and we've done that. So I don't think, it's not that I'm trying to discredit your question, Councillor Redwan. I just don't think it's appropriate right now, because we do have that process, and that's what we're sticking to, and council has designed that process for us. So, you know, that might be something that you want to speak to that department about yourself if they have anything else. But right now, all we would be doing would be following the process of what we've set for them. That's what we've asked staff to do.
I understand that is out of their scope, and they're probably having to deal with something that is not within their, within their scope of practice at all. I see the city manager has his hand up. I'm just wondering if they have resources to refer people to. I mean, it was a very, they're experiencing some trauma. I have, I have some empathy for that, but I understand that. You know, I've also gotten complaints about the property too, and I understand that side of things as well. And I reiterated that too. So just wondering if staff are able to refer residents anywhere.
Let's go
like I did.
Let's go to the city manager and see what he has to say. Thank you.
Your worship, through you to the councillor, there's all sorts of different ways that members of our community can get help, everything from, quite frankly, the YMCA to other community groups. But also I'll put in a plug for 211, which is a phone number that can be dialed to seek assistance in a number of different areas. And it's a provincially sponsored program. And that's another avenue that those who are suffering for whatever reason can explore.
Thank you.
No, I appreciate that. I referred them to the grief center because I wasn't sure what to recommend, but anyway, I appreciate that.
Thank you. All right, Councillor Harris, over to you, please.
Thank you. Through you to back on, sorry, I'm just looking at the number here. I think it's 5.3, sorry, the traffic paint. I know I've spoken to a couple of folks around town who are in the business, and I'm just noticing that we have a sole source contract being sent to a company in Ontario. And I'm not necessarily seeing, I know we don't have a social procurement policy to follow as staff, so I'm not going to try to hold staff to account on that, although I wish we certainly did have that. And I know that Commissioner Fudge has spoken about that in the past, and their due diligence on that is coming soon, I believe. But what is the process for selecting this sole source contract? It's a big number. It's $100,000. And I know that there's, for example, Doug at Sherwin-Williams, who's a sales rep for Sherwin-Williams here in town. I've spoken to him in the past about things, and I know that he used to do work with the city. And so I reached out to him in a preliminary way to say, have you had a chance to bid on a tender on this? Because I know that Sherwin-Williams would have a comparable paint. But he said that didn't happen, that they were supposed to get one in January, February, and they didn't get one. So I'm just wondering, Commissioner Hugenholtz, if you can just refresh us or at least provide some context to the public on how we go about that.
Sure. Through you, Your Worship. This is a tender that we have put out in the past on numerous occasions. It was publicly advertised. Any qualified bidders were allowed to put in a submission. But there are strict technical requirements. And the last time we put this out, I believe in 2016, there were no other manufacturers that could meet the technical requirements. We had on a couple different occasions tried other suppliers' paint, but we had tremendous amount of issues with clumping, and it would create issues for our paint equipment. So that went on a couple times, and at the end of the day, we just said, well, you're not meeting our requirements, so you're out, essentially. Now, we have been in touch with those manufacturers on multiple occasions since then to inquire about any significant changes they had made to their requirement, their technical specifications, or to see if they had addressed the clumping issues, and they had not. So unfortunately, this is the only alternative for us at this time. Bidders still do have an opportunity to come to us and demonstrate that they have made changes and they're able to meet our requirements, but unfortunately at this time there is only the one. I'll point out as well that the other municipalities in the province were experiencing very similar issues, and in fact we have cooperated with them as well in past years on a joint procurement effort, so they are using the same paint as us.
Thank you.
Okay, and Commissioner, sorry, Your Worship, can I just ask one more question on that?
Yeah, you can ask another question on that. I don't want to get into though a one company sort of a question though, right? With your talking
No.
Sherwin-Williams, right? Okay, perfect.
Yeah, it's just Sherwin-Williams as an example of somebody I know used to supply paint to the city and doesn't, and now it's Franklin Paint Company that does through, I'm just trying to remember the name, Stinson Equipment
Yes,
Limited. Which is
I think all that information's in the report. Yeah, I read that.
It's out of Concord. So I guess Commissioner Hugenholtz, correct me if I'm wrong, we've had some problems with clogging in the paint lines for city equipment on this from Franklin's existing paint that they supply us, or was it a previous supplier of paint that we had the problems with?
Yeah, it was the other suppliers that we ended up having a tremendous amount of issues, and in fact, it put our paint program in jeopardy for those years. So, we obviously, for multiple reasons, would like to always go through the route of competitive bidding to get the best result for our citizens. But in this case, we can't afford to run this paint through our $200,000 paint truck and risk damaging all the components and the pumps, et cetera. And that is the situation we found ourselves in. So as I mentioned, we are certainly always open to those other manufacturers to demonstrate that they in fact have resolved these issues, but to date that's not been the case, unfortunately.
All right, thank you.
Deputy?
Thank you, Your Worship. Commissioner Hugenholtz, you did touch on it, but we are using the same product that other communities are using. And in the past, we've actually bought as a group. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Are we going to continue that practice going forward and maybe enhance, like for salt, sand, and other large quantities of product?
Yeah, we have multiple initiatives where we do joint procurement with other municipalities in the province. We do so, in fact, currently with our road salt as well. And there are other commodities as well that we would do joint purchasing on. Unfortunately, in this case, we wanted to get out the gate early to make sure we were assured for a supply of paint, which is why we're kind of going it alone in this case.
Wise move. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Hickey.
Thank you, Your Worship. I feel like I have to ask a question about paint, but I don't have a question about paint. I've been painting my house and I'm a little tired of paint. So that's that. I just wanted to mention for folks watching, 5.8 and 5.9, two really exciting steps in affordable housing in the city. Really big moves from both the city's plan, but also supporting private investment in affordable housing too. Both really exciting steps. That, and there's another cool one in there, 5.2, adding electric vehicle charging stations at Market Square. A great step in building that grid of electric vehicle charging stations, which New Brunswick actually has the highest per capita in the country of, which is pretty cool. So maybe not buy a Tesla, their stock's tanking, but something else along those lines. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Hickey. All good news. All right, so we have the motion on the floor. So I'll call the question. All in favor? Contrary minded? Motion carried. Thank you. City Clerk, next item, please.
Your Worship, next item is members' comments.
Okay, members' comments. Councillor Hickey, are you up first on that?
I mean, it was just a leftover hand, but I'll take it.
Okay.
I just wanted to mention that we had a really nice Remembrance Day ceremony, certainly led by the Remembrance Day Organizing Committee, led by Bernie Cormier and his group. Great job. I was very well attended, despite not trying to advertise it too much out of COVID protocol. But it was a really nice, respectful ceremony. I was in attendance. Councillors McKenzie, Ogden, Sullivan were in attendance at the King Square Cenotaph, and I know there were quite a few other councillors that were in attendance in their own communities, and certainly you, Your Worship, were representing all of us at King Square in laying the wreath. So I just want to recognize that and note how nice and moving of a ceremony it was.
Thank you, Councillor. I agree. Deputy.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just want to bring it to people's attention that our former friend, Mayor and Deputy Mayor Shirley McAlery, had a birthday last week. And without telling you how old she is, I will say she's older than me, but much younger than Councillor Lowe. So I just wanted to send best wishes out to her. I know she's still very active in the community and acting a lot younger than her age. Also, growth at a glance. People should know that so far in November alone, we've had 12 building-related permits with a value of over $24 million and 619 permits so far this year with a total of $93.9 million. Folks, the city is growing by leaps and bounds, and it's a good thing for everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy. Councillor Sullivan.
Thank you, Your Worship. It's been a busy week. First, congratulations to St. John High School Greyhounds football. Congratulations to Dave Grandy, the head coach, and to all of the volunteer coaching staff, and to all of the players and their families on a very exciting and hard-fought win in the final of the AAA High School Football Final this past Saturday in Moncton. It is the first time in the 58 years of its existence that this title has been won by a St. John team, let alone the St. John High School Greyhounds. So congratulations to the team and everybody involved. As I said a couple of weeks ago, it's Movember. And it looks like Councillor Ogden and I are a little late to the mustache culture of the horseshoe, but we do it for good reason. We've sacrificed our upper lips and the space there to grow a reminder of support for men's health. Movember supports research into prostate and testicular cancer, along with work in supporting men's mental health. You can check my social media for a link to donate or go directly to Movember Canada. I was humbled to represent council at the sod turning to dedicate the New Brunswick Naval Memorial. The sod turning was on Remembrance Day, and the memorial is going to be built along Harbor Passage on land that St. John Council unanimously dedicated to the cause. I do want to give a shout out and a thank you to the support I received from Brad Dreyer in the mayor's office for helping out and the logistics around the ceremony. It's going to be a fantastic addition to the city. I look forward to seeing it constructed next year. Thanks to the volunteers at Assumption Church on the west side. They are helping to facilitate 5 new St. Johners to come from some tough situations in the Eastern world to come to St. John. So they have volunteered to help facilitate these 5 men to come to St. John and to contribute. But the reason I know about it is because they reached out to me to see if we could get some St. John swag for them. And I reached out to our own Jennifer Waldschutz, who gave me 5 great St. John swag bags, maps, some orientation gear, and everything that new St. Johners would need. So first, thanks to Assumption Church and their volunteers for bringing in these new St. Johners. And thank you, and a heads up, if you're out there working and you bring some people to St. John, you can reach out to our staff and we can help with some orientation kits. So thanks there. I was lucky enough and met some very good staff out at Exhibition Park to get my 3rd vaccine. So boosters are available. Check the provincial websites to see if you are able to get them. If you have a mixed bag and one of them is an AstraZeneca, it's a 28-day wait. If you've had 2 mRNA vaccines, it's a 6-month wait to your booster, but certainly the line is not very long and you can book online for those. And if you haven't picked up quick test kits for COVID, they are still available at the cruise ship terminal uptown, and it's a very quick turnaround there. You park, you're in and out in 60 seconds, and you have something you can keep tabs on your COVID health. And just along those lines, a reminder, we are still in a pandemic. Wear your mask, sneeze into your elbows, socially distance. This will be over as long as we stay healthy. Thanks, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Sullivan. That was a packed members' comments with a lot of great information there. Thanks so much. Councillor Harris, you're up next.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a couple of quick little shout outs. One goes to St. Johners, Hillary Quinn and John O'Kane, who just welcomed one of the newest Johners into the city, baby Henry, as well as Michelle Lee, who runs Obscurity uptown. It's kind of a really cool shop uptown. And Justin Wiswell, who just had their little baby girl. So a couple of new Johners on the beat for us to look forward to, up and comers. And other than that, I just a couple of congratulations to Mark Bettel and the rest of the board of directors at St. John Airport for the new selection of Alexander Ross, who I guess they call Sandy, who will fit in. I know a lot of people from down in Charlotte County who have the nickname Sandy, so it's not too out of New Brunswick, even though he is from Halifax and has worked on a number of boards. He's the new CEO at St. John Airport. So YSJ is getting a new leader, and I think we're pretty excited for him to lead our airport through a pretty major transition. I know he's got his eyes set on an international connection, which could give our airport a strategic advantage. And I know it's a big fight among the 3. I mean, I should say fight. It's a big competition among the 3 airports for that competitive advantage. So best of luck to him. Just a couple of things I've heard from the community this week that I think are worth mentioning. It's one of those things that we want to, as councillors, make sure that we're echoing back to the community what we're hearing them tell us about. Not that we necessarily have all the right answers. We have really dedicated staff who are obviously working on things, and I guess for us, it's just a matter of continuing to raise the awareness around some of the concerns of citizens. So I know that we've had a lot of concern from a number of people in our disabled community, as well as our advocacy community around the Lancaster bus stop. Full trust in our director, Ian Fogan, who's leading St. John Transit, myself on the board. I know we are going to do the best we can to rectify that and to make that work for everybody. And I know the Lancaster Mall and their owners have released a statement about that. So we look forward to being able to make that right in the future. Heard from an entrepreneur today who really has a visionary, Mackenzie. He's an entrepreneur who's come through our ranks with Greater Economic Development Greater St. John when that was around before it was Envision St. John. coming through the incubator tracks to pitch a business around food security and food sovereignty, which is something near and dear to my heart. Mackenzie Churchison has a company called Flow Farms Nation, and it is an aquaponics integrated farming concept at this point in time. And if anybody who follows food sovereignty and food security, you'll know that the Netherlands is kind of this shining example of food security, where it's a tiny, tiny nation around the size of New Brunswick, but yet it is able to produce enough food so that it has a surplus. So it's able to export more than it imports in its food security. And here we are sitting on, we have a province that's farms only 11% of its arable land. The only food items that we are secure in as a province are blueberries, salmon, potatoes, and maple syrup. And he has a plan to start an aquaponics farm here in the city of St. John, and he's been working on it for 2 years. And he's just run into some hardship recently with a zoning regulation that the city of St. John has on a spot. So I just want to say to guys like Mackenzie and entrepreneurs out there, look, we don't always have solutions, but we do hear you and we want to work on it. And we see you, we value you. We know that these are the ideas of the future, and we want to catch up. And so besides that, heard from a few midwives this week who have been trying to break into the health scene here in New Brunswick for a decade to get midwifery proliferated. I know that we have our health minister, Minister Shepherd, who's working hard on a new plan to make sure St. Johners are on a better footing for healthcare. And I know midwifery continues to be one that is called for, and that has a huge return on investment available and has been proliferated across every other province except New Brunswick. So just a plug there for them who have reached out to me, although it's not in my lane, as Councillor Norton would point out. It's not something that we can do anything about. Just to bring those comments here to say I heard you, and we'll certainly pass them along. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Harris. Councillor, who's up next here? Councillor Redone.
Thank you, Mayor Rudin. I appreciate that. Yeah, so I had something sad that I did want to share today. About 17 years ago, up on 5B North, I had seen somebody who I thought was the new guy, and actually it wasn't the new guy, but I very, very quickly figured out that Dr. Lechmedial was definitely somebody that you wanted to see in your hospital. So unfortunately, we've lost Dr. Lechmedial this week, and for anybody who doesn't know, he was an interventional cardiologist, and he did a procedure called the mitra clip that was one of the less invasive procedures and very rare procedure that people could do in the province. He saved thousands of lives in our province, and I was just so proud to have known him professionally, and then later on ended up seeing him in my business. And it was interesting because I remember sometimes after he would leave, after having lunch, I would say that man has saved thousands of lives. And every time that I said something like that, my staff member would say, "You would never know it." And I said, yes. And I think that way that he was just so humble of a human being is part of the reason why people loved him so much. And so my deepest sympathies goes out to his family, friends, and all of his family at St. John Regional Hospital, because he really was like family there. I did want to also, on a positive note now, I'd like to also mention that Councillor Killen and I are actually doing some Facebook Lives together, and we're doing them Tuesday evenings, and we are talking about some things that are happening at City Hall from two different councillors' perspectives. So we're speaking for ourselves, and obviously not all of council, as we should not. And we just want to basically be able to update the public. So I hope that you guys will tune in. It's going to be on Tuesday evenings at 8 o'clock. And, we'll get to also talk about what's happened at council this evening, so the decisions that have been made after the fact. One question that I do have tonight that has come up numerous times actually is just an inquiry that I'd love an update on later on. and that is on the motion that previous Mayor Don Darling actually made on racial discrimination, where he had talked about maybe joining the coalition of municipalities against racism back in April 28th in 2021. So, I mean, obviously it is part of our belong in our new council priorities to foster diversity and inclusion. And I do want to mention that I just think that it's extremely important to be open and transparent as much as we can. And, you know, I do want to recognize that city staff have been extremely busy, especially this last year, with between COVID and the cyber attack and all of the other things that they've been doing. And so I don't want it to, you know, me asking about these sort of things, which I can do formally, obviously, but I don't want it to be seen as something as, you know, I'm not appreciating their work or that things are taking too long. Absolutely not. Things have been extremely busy at City Hall, and, you know, I know they're extremely committed to their work. So I just want to make sure that I have that clarified. And on that, I thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Councillor Redwan. Okay, we've got Councillor Ogden next, and then Councillor Norton.
Thank you, Mayor. I too want to congratulate St. John High School Greyhounds football program. I helped coach that team for years and played there, and my oldest son played there. And I think Dave Grandy, Joe Cox, all the coaches, and the Hounds themselves have a huge following, and I'm glad because it really lifts the spirits of St. Johners, and just so pleased. I also want to thank Fundy Minor Football, which runs in the metro area. So all the parents from Kinnicases Valley High and their kids all played in the same minor system that we do. I was vice president of Fundy Minor for a number of years, and we had $600,000 in equipment for people. So we had a lot of people who couldn't afford to play other sports, but they could play football because of this gear that's kept and money raised. And recreation is just so important to good mental and physical health. So I want to thank St. John High and KV. They played a very good sportsman's game, and Fundy Minor, who starts kids right at 5 and 6 years old, and to all the teams that have participated. And it's really good to see recreation at the forefront. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Norton?
Thank you, Your Worship. Just wanted to give a thank you to Lisa Casey and her communications team for always sending the good news and issues management. There's a lot going on, as we heard from Councillor Sullivan. So in doing so, it's hard to capture it all. But a couple things that maybe we missed, and certainly not intentionally, but there's 8 metered parking spaces installed on Charlotte Street to help accommodate motorists, and 8 temporary metered parking spaces, including 1 barrier-free space, have been installed on Charlotte Street between Union and North Market Street. So if anyone is out there picking that up, it's certainly it's a small step in the right direction to making our uptown more accessible and barrier-free for those that have mobility issues and trouble traversing some of the landscape that's up there. The right-hand lane of Charlotte Street has been closed to through traffic since the demolition of 91 King Street, as we know, which began in May of 2021, and following a traffic impact study and the approved bylaw amendments by Common Council, the additional on-street parking will help to offset the loss of spaces on King Street over the course of the construction. And these additional spaces will benefit patrons of uptown businesses and residents of the South Central Peninsula. So I think it's a win-win for business residents and those that certainly are challenged by maybe some mobility difficulties in their life. So thanks to Tim O'Reilly and his team. It's a bit of a good news story. So appreciate the time to say it.
Thank you, Councillor Norton. And that is a good point, because we have heard from the disabled community and they are looking for those barrier-free spots. And so with that, out of those 8, there is 1 there that will be barrier-free. So it's perfect, especially in that location where it's really warranted. Okay, so I will just say briefly that I will also send my condolences out to Dr. Lachmedio's family. He was a fantastic guy. He was so positive, always saw the glass half full. He was full of energy, and he was a real team builder and a team leader over there. He will be sorely missed. For Shirley McAlery, I didn't realize she was having a birthday, but for our former mayor and deputy mayor, I also want to send along my congratulations and happy birthday greetings as well. And this year we did Remembrance Day up at the square, and it was lovely. I donned my full regalia. I had my police escort, which was of course on foot since it was only going up a block. And we had a lot of people up there. I was surprised. It was a bit on the chilly side, but the sun was out and it was a lovely day. So it was great. So thanks to everyone. We've got a great update of what's going on in the community right now from all the councillors. So I will ask the city clerk to call the next item, please.
Yes, Your Worship. Next, we're under the consideration of bylaws section, item 10.1 on your agenda. And the first item is a staff report with a proposed amendment for the bylaw respecting fees for fire protection services in the city of St. John. And the fire chief will give a brief overview.
Thank you. Over to you, Chief Clifford, please.
Good evening, Your Worship and members of Common Council. As Council is aware, the bylaw respecting fees for fire protection services in the city of St. John has been recently expanded to include fees for service, which is under Schedule B, and fees for emergency response, Schedule C. The bylaw amendment before you at this time is with respect to the inclusion of a fee to item number 5, permits and other services in Schedule B for fire protection services in the city of St. John. In particular, this bylaw introduces a fee for those instances where the fire service is required to provide an inspection and processing of a follow-up report as required under an approval to operate issued by the province of New Brunswick pursuant to any of its acts or regulations by the St. John Fire Department. The $2,500 fee would be invoiced to the approval holder as identified within the license to operate.
Excellent. Okay, does anyone have any questions for the chief? If not, I would take, I'm going to let the city clerk tell me what I'll take. Oh, sorry, Councillor. Oh, hang on for a second. Councillor Harris, I've got to get the motion right. So I'm going to get the city clerk to give us the motion that we need. We need 2 motions for this.
Your Worship, that's correct. This is a simple first and second reading of the bylaw that's attached. So the first motion would be to give first reading to the bylaw.
So first reading by title, Councillor Harris and Councillor Hickey. On the question? All in favor? Contrary minded? Motion carried.
A law to amend a bylaw respecting fees for fire protection services in the city of St. John. And Your Worship, another motion for second reading by title.
Second reading by title, Councillor Harris. And Councillor Sullivan. On the question? All in favor? Contrary minded? Motion carried. Thank you.
A law to amend a bylaw respecting fees for fire protection services in the city of St. John. So next, Your Worship, we have another consideration of a bylaw, and this is 10.2 on your agenda. It's for a proposed zoning bylaw amendment with section 59 conditions at 573 Woodward Avenue, and it's third reading. Commissioner Hamilton will give a brief overview.
Commissioner Hamilton.
Good evening, Your Worship, members of council. Before you this evening for third reading and approval of the required section 59 conditions is an application for rezoning, which was submitted by NJP Developments for a property located at 573 Woodward Avenue. The proposal involves a rezoning of the property from low to mid-rise residential to permit the development of 3 apartment buildings for a total of 225 residential units. The application did receive first and second reading following the required public hearing on November 1st. And I can confirm that all other legislative requirements have been met with this file. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Your Worship for the required motions.
Thank you, Commissioner. Okay, City Clerk.
Yes, Your Worship. So this one has 4 motions. So if we could go through them one by one, the first motion would be a reading of the bylaw in its entirety.
Councillor Redwan, did you have a question for the commissioner?
I do. Thank you, Mayor Rudin. Yeah. I do have one question about whether or not the EMO has actually looked at this, first of all, about the cul-de-sac there. I don't know if Chief Clifford would have any insight as to whether or not he's seen this, or Commissioner Hamilton wants to give any insight on that.
Your Worship, I can speak to that if you like.
Please.
It's a standard part of our process for our applications to be submitted for public safety considerations to be assessed. And I can advise that there will be, the report notes that the potential for a second access was assessed by the traffic impact study. It's not a requirement. However, through the subsequent subdivision process, there will be the assessment of the potential for a road connection to be made for the future development property, the lands that are to the south of the proposal. So that does exist as the project moves forward to the next phases.
Okay. And Commissioner Hamilton, I'm having a huge challenge with this one going forward, and I'll tell you why. I have connected myself with WorkSafe NB. WorkSafe NB does oversee some of this, but so with the Occupational Health and Safety Act, they end up overseeing basically the staff on site for the blaster. I've still yet to figure out who at the provincial level is going to end up overseeing the operation. So basically, they have made it very clear that they do not end up overseeing whether or not if there's anything unsafe for the residents of the area, or whether or not there's anything unsafe that's going to happen with the operation. And then I was referred to Justice and Public Safety.
Councillor, I'm just going to stop you right there. Commissioner, is that part of this discussion for us of a rezoning?
No, the issue of blasting is not something that the city regulates, so that would be outside of the domain of council in terms of the public hearing process.
Okay, that's fine.
Well,
So
you see, part of the problem that I have with this, Mayor, I'm sorry, is that in the Local Governance Act, the purpose of the local government is to develop and maintain safe and viable communities under Section 5, Paragraph C.
Councillor Redwan?
This is a challenge that
Councillor
Redwan?
Yes. I have to stop you. I'm sorry, but I have to stop you because we are doing this rezoning application right now, and you're going into the governance, the Local Governance Act, etc. So that's out of the scope of this. So if you want to deal with that, you can deal with the commissioner, deal with the city manager or whatever on that level. But right now for this, to be fair to this hearing, then we have this third reading here that we need to do within the scope of rezoning. So I want to keep it to that.
Well, Mayor, I mean, I just can't agree. When it comes to the residents of this area,
okay,
we're allowing some rezoning, right, for this area. And, you know, what's going to happen for recourse if anything happens to their properties? Nobody knows how long the blasting is going to last for. The developer was not able to answer that question.
Redwan, what I will say about all of that is that there's 10 voters, 10 voting council members. Everyone has the same information, and really this needs to go to the vote of council. You can vote against it if you are uncomfortable with it, but like you had your kit, you had all the information that you had in it, so we've got to go forward with this based on, to be fair to this application. This is on a sidetrack really, and at the end of the day, what we have to do is we have to look at the scope of what we're doing, and we have been provided information for the scope of the question that we've been asked and not outside of that. And so we have to make a decision based on that. So I'm going to.
I think that I have 6 minutes to talk.
No, I don't think, because, I have to keep you, we've probably used it up by now.
And then another 3, right? I mean,
you can ask a question, but you have to keep your questions within the scope of the application, to be fair to the applicant.
What about being fair to the residents of the neighborhood?
Well, you're going to vote no on it, I guess.
I think it should be tabled until we actually know who's going to oversee this.
Well, you can put that on the floor, I guess, and see what happens.
Okay, I would certainly do that. I would move to table this recommendation till we know who's actually going to be overseeing the operation.
Got a seconder? Motion dies. Okay, Councillor or Deputy, do you have your hand up for this?
I do, Your Worship. Thank you. I think this question would be for Jacqueline. I had a call this afternoon. The resident in Cedar Point was absolutely thrilled with the project. The only question she wanted to know was about the traffic study. Is there a possibility that there will be lights going in at that intersection or possibly a traffic circle, a roundabout, when this development goes in? Or do we know?
Your Worship, through you to the Deputy Mayor, my understanding, and I'll perhaps have Mr. O'Hearn clarify this, but the traffic impact study that was completed did not indicate that additional infrastructure is required to support the development, but I'll just have Mr. O'Hearn confirm that point.
Your Mayor and Council, yes, Ms. Hamilton is quite correct. Nothing in the traffic report suggested any traffic lights. In fact, it said just the opposite.
The opposite.
Sorry, I should be clearer. It suggested there was no need for lights given the volumes of traffic. My apology.
No need to apologize. Thanks for clearing that up. And we don't know yet, I guess, Jacqueline, how long the blasting is going to go on. I mentioned it at the last, at the first hearing, but that report hasn't come back yet. I've taken.
No, Mr. O'Hearn may want to comment on it, but I think that the developer is still assessing the options there, and there's further due diligence required to assess the scope of what's required. I would point out also for council's benefit on this. This is a revised version of a proposal that was approved by council back in 2018, and the previous proposal involved much greater site disturbance and to accommodate that development. So that would have occurred had this change not been proposed. With the footprint of the 3 apartment developments, you're going to see far less site disturbance occurring with this proposal.
Well, that's good to hear. Thank you, Jack.
Councillor Harris?
Thank you, Your Worship, through you and to, I guess, the council at large here, as well as to Councillor Radwan. Certainly sympathetic to the concerns of residents. As a builder who's had to go through multiple tiers of inspections and different departments who have to regulate my work and the work of my team in the past, whether it be fire regulation, whether it be remediation of asbestos, there are numerous departments, and I know that our consul, I guess, Mackenzie. My gosh, I'm getting different things mixed up. Melanie Tompkins has put a lot of work into this and has given us a fairly high level and detailed report, which costs staff a fair bit of time to dig into. And so I've heard the calls of Ms. McCormick. I've heard a few other people who are concerned about this blasting reality. But my view of this case is that it is a case closed, that the province is responsible to issue the permit for a blast. And the city of St. John is to approve the land use and is to approve the project based on its outcome. And that's why I'm in this situation. I fielded a few calls and I've tried to do my best to respond and to carry on Melanie Tompkins' I guess, assessment of the legal ramifications and concerns. So I would just say this is one of those challenging areas where, obviously the city of St. John and our inspection team is the front line, but unfortunately it is not the only line. There are federal regulations and provincial regulations, and they need to be accountable to our residents as well. And if our residents have concerns about that, those are the people that they need to take it up with. We just don't have the jurisdiction to get into it. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Harris. Councillor Radwan?
Thank you very much, Mayor. Appreciate it. I do have one question for Commissioner Hamilton. Just wondering if the city knows who the blasting company is going to be that's going to be working on the site. Do we get any information about that?
I'm not personally aware. I would just refer that question to Mr. Ahern.
I do not know, Your Worship, what company will be doing the blasting.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Is there any way for residents to find this kind of information out if they want to know? The big thing is, and I'm so happy that Councillor Harris, you were able to comment. I guess it depends on what side you're on as to whether or not you can comment. But the problem that I see is there's a gap in the system. Nobody knows who to contact, who's going to go oversee this. So
Councillor Redwan?
That's an issue. Yeah, I know I'm not able to talk because I'm on the wrong side. But I appreciate, you know, I don't want to have an issue with the developer either, you know, to be honest. And in all fairness,
we're so off topic with this thing with the blasting. I'm just trying to get this decision made for third reading. Or are we going to rezone this from single to the multi? That's all we're trying to do right now. I mean, that issue, you can pursue that with residents if you want, I guess, but for council, at the end of the day, council, I will say this, if you want a risk adverse project, then don't do anything. Every project's going to have some risk at the end of the day. We just declared growth as our initiative. So we're going to have some risks going forward as we grow. It's not the easiest thing to do. You're built on rock. So, you know, that's
totally fair. And for me, I'm all for growth too. I just want smart growth, and I think that people have a right to information. So anyway,
and they can find that out. They can find that out. Okay, so City Clerk, I'm back to you. So we need a reading for third reading entirety, I believe you said.
Yes, Your Worship, that would be the first of four motions.
Okay, so I need I need that first motion, and I need a seconder. We got Councillor Harris and Councillor Stewart on the question. All in favor? Contrary minded? Councillor Redwan, contrary minded. Motion carried.
A law to amend the zoning bylaw of the City of St. John. The zoning bylaw of the City of St. John, enacted on the 15th day of December 2014, is amended by amending Schedule A, the zoning map of the City of St. John, by rezoning a parcel of land having approximately 2 hectares located at 573 Woodward Avenue, also identified as a portion of PID number 55220701, from low-rise residential to mid-rise, pursuant to a resolution adopted by Common Council under Section 59 of the Community Planning Act. And so next, Your Worship, we need a third reading by title motion.
Okay, need a third reading by title, Deputy. And Councillor Ogden on the question. All in favor? Contrary minded? Councillor Radwan, contrary minded. Motion carried.
A law to amend the zoning bylaw of the City of St. John. And next motion, Your Worship, is to rescind the previous Section 39 condition.
Motion to receive previous 30. Okay, Councillor Sullivan and Councillor Killen on the question. All in favor? Contrary minded? Councillor Redwan, motion carried.
And the final motion, Your Worship, is to adopt the current, or the proposed Section 59 condition.
Okay, to adopt. Councillor Sullivan and Councillor Harris. On the question. All in favor? Contrary minded? Councillor Redwan, motion carried.
Okay, and that's it for that item. And so there's next another zoning bylaw amendment for consideration, and this is for 54 Broad Street. It has Section 59 conditions, and again, Commissioner Hamilton will give a brief overview.
Commissioner Hamilton?
Good evening, Your Worship, members of council. Before you this evening for third reading and approval of the Section 59 conditions is an application for rezoning that was submitted by Matt Carr for a property located at 54 Broad Street, which is the location of the former St. John the Baptist Rectory building. The proposal involves a rezoning of the property from neighborhood community facility to urban center residential, and this is in order to permit the conversion of the building to 5 residential units. The application did receive first and second reading following the required public hearing on November 1st, and I can confirm that all other legislative requirements have been met. And with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Your Worship, for the required motions.
Thank you. City Clerk, first motion up.
Yes, so there's 3 motions, Your Worship. The first one is third reading in its entirety.
Okay, I'll take a mover and a seconder on that. Councillor Ogden, Councillor Stewart. On the question. All in favor? Contrary minded? Motion carried.
A law to amend the zoning bylaw of the City of St. John. The zoning bylaw of the City of St. John, enacted on the 15th day of December 2014, is amended by amending Schedule A, the zoning map of the City of St. John, by rezoning a parcel of land having an area of approximately 0.16 hectares located at 54 Broad Street, also identified as PID number 0000372 and 0000232, and 5508651 from neighborhood community facility to urban center residential pursuant to a resolution adopted by Common Council under Section 59 of the Community Planning Act. And next, Your Worship, motion is needed to approve, do the reading by title for this property.
Third reading by title. Deputy and Councillor Hickey on the question. All in favor? Contrary minded? Motion carried.
A law to amend the zoning bylaw of the City of St. John. And the final motion, Your Worship, is the adoption of the submitted Section 59 conditions.
Adoption of Section 59 conditions. Councillor Hickey, Councillor or Deputy on the question. All in favor? Contrary minded? Motion carried. Okay, City Clerk, next item.
Next, we have under business matters, item 12.1 is a staff report and attached presentation entitled In from the Cold Housing Blitz. And Director Phil Willett will provide an introduction to this.
Over to you, Director Willett.
Through you, Your Worship, to members of council, as many in our community know, homelessness continues to be an issue we are all attempting to address. While the city plays a monitoring role in this regard, various community partners, provincial government and federal government are the leads in this endeavor. As the number of homeless individuals continues to rise, emergency shelters have not consistently been able to meet the nightly demand. As a result, shelters have been forced to turn away individuals seeking shelter on a recurrent basis. Excuse me, my lights turn off. In response, the Human Development Council is leading the In From the Cold Housing Blitz campaign. This campaign is designed to reduce or eliminate the need to turn individuals away from emergency shelters in St. John. So today we have representatives from the Human Development Council to do a short presentation. I did take a look at those who are invited, and it looks like Michael McKenzie is the only individual here, so I'm assuming he is organizing this for everybody. But we also, who's a system planner with Human Development Council, Greg Bishop is the Director of Strategic Initiatives, Kathy Boyce is the Affordable Housing Specialist, and Chris Gorman is a systems planner. So I'll leave it to Michael, I believe, to get us started.
Thanks, Phil. I'm not sure, so we did intend to have 4 of our team here. I'm not sure if Greg is on the line yet, but I'll happily kick it off if not. And I'll ask my colleague Chris to bring the slides up as well, if he doesn't mind. I'll start just by thanking council and city staff for their engagement on this file. Obviously, homelessness is an item of concern for all of us all year round, but becomes particularly so during the winter months. And so while we will provide a bit of an overview of homelessness in general in St. John, the main focus of today's presentation will be on In From the Cold, which is a particular campaign to house 30 people quickly before Christmas in the effort to avoid opening an out of the cold shelter. So I'll hand it over to Chris to kick us off with a few stats.
Great, thank you. Apparently I can't have my camera on and share a screen at the same time, so lucky to all of you. So what I'll say first is, as we start sharing a few numbers to show the state of homelessness in the community, is that the numbers that we can present here tonight are not perfect. They're the best we have. They're the most broad view of the numbers that we could possibly put together. But homelessness changes overnight, so it's really not ever going to be possible to be able to say exactly how many people are homeless in a community. And what we're able to share here tonight is data from our by names list primarily, and that is a comprehensive list that we manage through the HDC but work in partnership with all the frontline agencies in the community. And it really is a full profile of everyone we know to be experiencing homelessness in the community. So it's not just a list of names, it's a list of all pertinent data that we could possibly have. And we use that data both for purposes like this to better understand the problem, but also to prioritize and match people to housing and supports when it becomes available. So the state of homelessness right now in St. John is, we know of approximately 120 people who are homeless, 69 of whom are chronically homeless. And what that means is that they've been homeless at least for 6 months already this year or over the past year. So that number is the number that we're particularly focused on, because it's those individuals that really need intensive supports in order to solve their own homelessness. So the 120 is we can estimate, a portion of those folks will self-resolve. Very few of the chronically homeless individuals will self-resolve without some deep supports attached to them. So it's a pretty even breakdown in St. John as far as gender that we see. We do know that we housed over the past year 100 individuals exactly, which always sounds like it's a fake number when it's so even. And of that, it was a perfectly even split between men and women who were housed as well. Primarily, it's folks staying in shelters. As Phil mentioned, the shelters are fairly full these days. There's very few open beds, even as of tonight. So we have about 42% of the folks we see in shelter, 31 sleeping rough. So really, what we're seeing is more people outside because the shelters are full. The age breakdown probably isn't too shocking to anyone. The largest number is the 25 to 40-year-old range. Still a pretty high number of 55 plus in the city. These numbers are really, as far as the age breakdown, the gender breakdown, and the sleeping location, it's not far off from what we see in Fredericton and Moncton as well. And then so as we dig in a little bit deeper to these numbers, this is all based off our BNL data, but at the end of April, we conducted a point in time count, which was a pretty intensive survey done at the end of April with everyone that we could find out in the community that night or who was staying at shelter that night. And it's a pretty in-depth survey done. And so what we saw there was, of the 58 or so individuals that took the survey, 84% of our homeless population are dealing with substance use issues. 78% dealing with mental health issues. The number over here on the right, 76% visit an emergency room at least once, and 40% were hospitalized at least once. So it's a population, obviously, that's requiring a good deal of energy and support, and really leads into what Michael's going to dive into now with the In From the Cold initiative, where we're trying to at least get through the next couple months without things getting worse.
Thanks, Chris. So what we're primarily here to discuss today is this campaign, which we're calling In From the Cold. I'll make a quick note that this is a community effort. This is not the HDC show. It's really informed by all of our frontline agency partners. The primary goal of this campaign is to house 30 individuals experiencing homelessness before Christmas. And when we say house 30 people, we're talking about housing with supports attached. Achieving this would also achieve a few other outcomes. One, reduce and avoid turnaways from shelters. As Chris mentioned, shelters are often at capacity and are forced to turn folks away. This is concerning any time of the year, but also obviously more so when it's minus 20 degrees outside. By freeing up some capacity, it would also allow for more social distancing in congregate settings like shelters. So there is a COVID component to this as well. And finally, one of our ultimate goals is to avoid opening an out of the cold shelter. Every winter, as the temperature starts to drop, we hear conversations straight across the country of the possibility of opening an additional shelter, which certainly makes sense as an emergency response. There's nothing inherently wrong with that, and often it is the best response if necessary. But it is a temporary solution. And for us, given the numbers that we see in terms of rough sleeping, our community partners would prefer to invest in long-term solutions, which we know necessitates housing, as well as support. So as I mentioned, anytime we're talking about folks experiencing homelessness, we're tying the two together. This slide provides a bit of an inventory of our current resources toward this campaign. So starting with housing, we currently have access to 10 provincial rent supplements. This is through Social Development's Rent Supplement Assistance Program, which lowers the rent for an individual to 30% of their income, and the rest is covered by social development. We also have access to 2 portable rent subs. So it's essentially the same program, except that for portable rent subs, the rent sub is attached to the individual as opposed to the unit. We have access to up to 5 units through Elizabeth Fry's My Place program. We also have access to Housing Alternatives' new SRO, or single room occupancy project, also known as Rooming House. And then we're exploring new housing opportunities through a landlord engagement campaign that we would be happy to discuss during the question period. So, of course, we are attaching those to supports as well. This project involves 3.5 new positions that are funded through federal dollars through the Reaching Home funding stream that comes through the Human Development Council. It involves 1 new staff for Elizabeth Fry's, apologies for the typo there, it is not Effie's, but E. Fry's My Place. It also contributes to 1.5 new positions through Housing Alternatives to support folks in housing, as well as 1 new position through Fresh Start for the same purpose. And we also hope to use this campaign to leverage existing mental health and addiction services through the province. So that's a bit of, as I mentioned, an inventory of our current resources. And in terms of the process we'll be using to prioritize folks and connect them to those resources, I will hand it over to Kathy.
Thanks, Michael. Good evening, Your Worship and Council. Thank you for having us here tonight. So just to give you a little bit more context around the existing system that we use to prioritize and match individuals to housing in our community when they're experiencing homelessness. A coordinated access system, as you see here on the screen, is a single standardized process where an individual can access supports, services, and housing. So I'll quickly run through what the system might look like for someone experiencing homelessness, and this is the system that we use here in St. John. So essentially it's a one front door for anyone in our community who's experiencing homelessness. For example, if someone arrives at Outflow Men's Shelter, they would engage in a 14-day diversion period. So we have a number of access points across the city, including both the men's and women's shelter, as well as some other locations such as Fresh Start, Housing Alternatives, all of the agencies that would provide housing or support services in the community. So an individual could arrive at any of one of those access points, is what we call them, and they would undergo an initial triage, and the agency would work with them to divert them from entering the homeless serving system. So after that first 14-day initial triage, the individual would then be added to the by name list. So we use a common assessment across the system. All of the agencies would use the same assessment in order to determine what the individual's needs are once they are in housing, because as Chris and Michael both mentioned, part of the big piece that we work on here is to both house people but also support them, particularly when they do need a high level of supports when they are in housing. So once they're added to our by name list, they undergo a prioritization process. And of course, we all know that there are limited resources when it comes to housing and support. So this is kind of the most equitable way to access housing in our community. Individuals would be prioritized based on a number of vulnerability factors on the list, and that way we're able to know kind of who needs the housing and supports the most and make the most of our limited resources. And so part of this coordinated access system is the data collection and management piece that Chris was mentioning. When we have such robust data, we're able to understand our system and understand how to make improvements in the system and improve it for efficiency to make sure that people's experiences of homelessness are limited, and when they do exist, that they're rare and brief. So I guess I'll move on to the next slide. So this is a system that we know works. It's a system that's being used both across the US and Canada. And I just wanted to quickly highlight that during the pandemic, throughout the pandemic, as Chris mentioned, we were able to house 100 people through this system. And we were able to reduce chronic homelessness by 10% here in St. John. And now that we have this data, we're able to continue to reduce our numbers and understand our system in a more fulsome way. So the reason I wanted to mention all of this is just so that to provide some awareness that this is something that works, this is something that we're working on, and that all of the agencies that would touch the homeless serving sector in the city are at the table and are having these conversations. So the benefit of this type of process is that everyone's at the same table, so it becomes more of a community process. They're no longer individual agencies clients, they become community clients, and we can support them in that way. So just to touch on further on the In From the Cold effort, the In From Cold is really just an enhancement of this existing system, and we're hoping to expedite this system within the next couple of months before the winter comes, which is coming quickly. And just to highlight a couple of key milestones that we've already met with this campaign to date. So we do have 15 to 20. This number has gone up within the past couple of weeks. So we do have 15 to 20 moves already in motion. So we're hoping to be able to move at least 15, if not more, folks before December 1st. So that's wonderful. And that's both through matching people to housing as well as matching people to supports. There are also some efforts being made with the provincial government to expedite some special care home assessments with individuals who are currently staying at shelter and who may need more intensive supports through the special care home system. And we've been able to secure a couple of new landlord partnerships that we use to attach the rental supplements to. So we can't really do this work without landlords who are willing to work with us and kind of understand the type of work that we do. So it's been really great to have these landlord partnerships, and we're hoping to, as Michael was mentioning, increase our partnerships with landlords through more of an external in from the cold campaign. And we've also received some financial support to help with furnishings and startup costs for individuals when they do transition into their units. So I think that's it for me. I was going to hand it over to our colleague Greg. I think he might have hopped on the call.
Hi, thank you, Kathy. Apologies for my late arrival here. Good evening, Your Worship and council members. Yeah, so I hope you've enjoyed the presentation so far. I'm just catching up here, but I think what really one of the most important aspects of this presentation is the role of the municipality. We're fortunate to work in Moncton, Fredericton, Bathurst, and Miramichi, and consult in the Atlantic provinces and sit on a number of national committees on homelessness, and understand that municipal role in homeless reduction efforts really is tailored to the city, and so it all depends on services and priorities. So we're quite excited to work or to continue the work with the City of St. John to identify ways in which the city can help this campaign and in a more broader effort as well. So really exploratory, and the topics and themes that we've covered to date have been firstly around engagement and awareness. So we appreciate the time tonight that we have with you to speak to the issue. And it's so important for there to be a shared understanding about the causation and solutions to homelessness. So we look forward to continued engagement with the city. It's probably been mentioned before I got on here, but there is a campaign to engage with local landlords, and we hope to use the city communication platform towards that landlord engagement piece. There's also some discussions underway right now around developing some contingency plans. It is important for us to have plan Bs if all of our efforts still succeed. We may still see people out of doors who need some temporary warming space. So we look forward to working with Mike Carr and EMO on that. One thing that we are still struggling with, and it's a common theme, is around mental health and addictions. And so we're looking for even some in-kind support or some natural partnerships, perhaps with the mobile crisis response team, to see if there are preventative ways that we can de-escalate situations or prevent them from requiring de-escalation within the city shelter system. So we're looking forward to exploring ways in where we can see some natural overlap. And as well on provincial advocacy with both departments of social development and health, and really having a shared message to the province around what is required locally for our homeless reductions efforts. We're quite fortunate to have very good relationships with social development's regional staff and central staff. They're very familiar with our work and the work required, but it still is an effort that does require all hands on board. So those are the ideas that we feel are a great starting point. And beyond this initial campaign, we look forward to continued engagement with the city on a broader strategy to end chronic homelessness in St. John. So thank you very much, and we're now on to questions.
Okay, we do have a few questions for you, but to Chris and Michael and Kathy and Greg, I do want to say thank you very much for coming in. It's important for the city to understand what's actually happening out there. And it's important I found it very interesting to have the statistics and that link between, substance abuse, mental illness, and homelessness. I think those things are all important as we try to go forward to try to mitigate some of the impacts for our citizens, and how do we work on that. So it's really great to have you here today. I do have quite a few people that want to make a comment or have a quick question for you. So I'm going to turn it over to Councillor Harris first, please.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you to the rest of the presenters on this file. Thank you so much for all your work on this. It's a timely and important issue. I guess I have a couple of questions with regards to connection to landlords. Are we expecting a concerted social media campaign on this? And I know, just because I know that there's a number of councillors on this, even this call, but as well as myself, I run a program out of the Tool Library trying to help people with connection to jobs in the construction and the trades who may have barriers to employment. So I'd be interested in comments on how other organizations can get involved, what kind of campaign they can look forward to, and how they can best utilize their platform and their audience to get this word out. Because I really do believe this is a go wide as much as possible approach to get as many of these landlords involved. There's a lot of new investors in the city. There's a lot of new real estate companies that are coming into the city to invest. And so not a lot of them would have had time to get connected with the city communication platforms. So if we can get them out as far, I know we have business leaders like Councillor Stewart here who would have captive audience on multiple platforms. I would have a captive audience on multiple platforms. So I guess my question is, how do we get involved with that? What do we look for? And will you keep us in the loop on that directly, or should we be looking for something in a certain timeline?
Thank you, Councillor Harris. Yes, we absolutely want a wide audience. We want to cast a wide net. And certainly once the kickoff begins for the engagement piece, we'll be looking for your shares, likes, and to forward as much information as available. I think, and I will lead it off to Kathy as well, but an important consideration in this effort is we have a short-term campaign and only so much capacity to actually move people into housing and support individuals as well. There are only so many rent subsidies that could be attached to units. However, there are some really creative examples as well where landlords are looking to sharpen their pencil and see if they can create deep subsidies themselves. But I'll just move it over to Kathy might be able to provide some more examples.
Thank you, Greg. Thanks, Councillor Harris. Yes, I would I guess echo what Greg has been saying. We've even just kind of in passing have mentioned this to landlords, and many of them have been jumping on board already. So it's been fantastic to see that. So I think we can continue to encourage any creative strategies that landlords would bring forward. I do think I agree with Greg in that we do have a limited number of provincial rental subsidies that are available to our table at the moment, but it would be interesting to see what other solutions could be brought forward for sure. We will be working with Lisa Casey through the city to promote some of the social media, as well as we're working on a media campaign with Bonfire Communications. So we'll definitely be sure to make certain that you're aware of it, and we'll keep you in the loop.
Good. Thank you. Councillor Redwan, you're up next.
Thank you, Mayor Rudin, through you to everybody that was presenting. Thank you, first of all, for your presentation. I've had a little technological issue, so I apologize for my first question. I was trying to get back to the first page of your presentation. I think, is the number 129 people that you estimated to be homeless in the city? Was that the number?
Chris, would you like to confirm?
Sure thing. It's a good question. The numbers that we presented were based off of the first day of November. So they may be slightly different as of this very moment. What the slide said for the 1st of November was 120 total homeless that we're aware of, and by aware of that we know by name, who have signed consent forms to be a part of this coordinated access system. 69 of those are chronically homeless. So that's really our focus area, but it's 129 total. What I would say to that is we can solve a problem that only exists for 120 people. And our first step is to house 30 by Christmas, but this is not an overwhelming large number. So, we're fairly confident through our approach that this 120 or 69 chronically homeless individuals is not an insolvable problem.
Yeah, and Chris, I was just wondering, so then my next question was, and the first one I wanted to already have prepped, but my next question was, out of the places like Outflow and any of the other places that would house temporarily anybody who is homeless, how many beds are there around the city?
At the emergency shelters, there are 40 beds available. There are some other beds available for young people, but it's 40 emergency shelter beds. And that's including every overflow bed that they have access to.
Okay, so if there was a teen resource center would probably be their avenue, is that right?
Yes.
Okay. And what about families? Like, I realize that sometimes that's a bit of a challenge.
It's certainly a challenge in St. John. We don't have what we would consider to be a standalone family shelter.
Wow. Okay, no, that's some great insight. Thank you so much for all that you're doing. I appreciate your group in here today.
If it's ever helpful, we have access to a wealth of data here. We can break it down in different ways if there are ongoing questions in the future.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
Councillor Killen?
Thank you, Your Worship. It's so wonderful to see you all here tonight. I'm familiar with these wonderful people as I was a tenant of the hub as well for a time. So I just love this concept of community care that you're bringing to the table. And so I'm wondering how we can make this like a long-term thing, because I realize this is very much to do with the winter and trying to get this kind of momentum moving. So how can we continue that ongoing so that we can potentially house all these folks?
Thank you, Councillor Killen. I think there's many opportunities beyond the winter to really dig in and to identify which areas of focus the city could play a role in. We do have a number of engagements with the province as well. We are working with them to assist in the development of a multi-year plan to end chronic homelessness that would have multiple pillars, 5 pillars, in fact, including partnerships, housing, prevention, health, and data. And so we're just kind of in the initial stages of really kind of developing that plan. However, at the same time, our office is interested in taking a lead role in a plan for St. John that would look more at like a 2-year or 2 to 3 year stage. And I think this is just the beginning. And so I do think that there will be ways in which we can identify the city's role in this effort.
All right, thank you. The deputy's up next, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you guys for coming in. All very familiar faces, because I've been on the CCH for a few years. A couple of questions have already been answered, but I guess for me, you know, when I see this concept of housing first, completely understand. Without a roof over your head, nothing else matters. You know, you need to have that comfort zone, and then the wraparound services. So I'm totally support, and I'm so proud of St. John for their by name list and housing people instead of just extending out more and more emergency shelters. My concern is we house so many people. There are nights through the winter, very, very cold nights, when we have people that are turned away. They're turned away. There's no more beds. And where do these people go? You know, if we have a major fire, they go, and there's people displaced from that fire, or a flood. We have Red Cross, other agencies step in, and they're taken care of. There seems to be a gap here, and how do we close that gap? Is my question. Is there a way the city can help? Anybody?
Thank you, Councillor McKenzie. And I do believe there is, and I don't want to put the shelters, well, I guess I am putting them on a spot in a sense, and some early conversations are around even seeing about increasing their capacity so that would occur less frequently. But beyond that, this year, anecdotally at least, it does seem like there is a larger visible presence of homeless individuals in the city and rough sleepers that is concerning. We had an incident or an occurrence just this week where the shelters were full. It was a miserable day, and someone really was new to the city, and you know, thankfully we were able to assist them, but we can only imagine it was basically because they rolled down the hall at the hub. And how many are out there who may not, it's not our line of business, by the way, but who are in a similar circumstance. It is concerning. And so while our best efforts and interest are to ensure that housing options are available and that we reduce the pressures of the shelter system so that they can have fewer incidents where they are turning people away, I think we've come to the realization in our team as well, and in working with the community stakeholders, that we are still going to need some level of a plan B or multiple options so that we can have some certainty and comfort that people aren't going to freeze to death this winter. So is there a specific thing we can do right now? I would say that, you know, working with EMO and community stakeholders to really kind of have a few options is our best plan right now.
So EMO. That would be
well. When we're working with the city, I think this is what we're kind of pointing to. Yeah, and this might also mean that we're looking at. Mike Carr was good to point out there's difference between operations and emergency response. So whether there are some strategies around temperatures, and after certain temperatures, spaces open up, that's to be determined.
Right. Okay. And the last thing, I've got others here, but if I'm a landlord watching tonight, and I want to help, what do I do?
Kathy, are we comfortable giving out your phone number?
Give me a call. Yes. Well, they can reach out via our website, so sjhdc.ca. And there is an email address on there that I can share here now. So it's bnlupdates@sjhdc.ca. Yes, I'd be happy to talk with them.
Perfect. Well, thank you all for coming in.
All right, Councillor Ogden.
Yeah, I want to thank you for the excellent presentation. The Human Development Council is so very, very important to this city. It's a super organization. Recently, I was involved with helping a family, mom and 4 kids, and Hestia House was full, and the female shelters wouldn't take the children, and of course couldn't get into male shelters. So there is an extreme need for a family situation. I think COVID has probably made things worse, but that there is a need there, and I'm really, really glad that the Human Development Council is onto this, and it's just a very valuable organization. Thank you.
Certainly is. Councillor Hickey?
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll be quick. I think it's been kind of alluded to over past a couple questions, but I did want to ask, how can this council, we talk about affordable housing so much, but don't necessarily get specific in terms of making sure that all of that spectrum is addressed? And how can we do a better job of making sure that those needs are met throughout the community as we, tonight we just approved, the contract for a plan on affordable housing in the city. How can we make sure that that full spectrum is represented within the housing that we're offering, in particular in our priority neighborhoods?
Thank you, Councillor Hickey. And Phil Willett also brought up that question and relating to the city's housing strategy. And we understand that the homelessness and supportive housing is not necessarily in scope of the strategy, yet there's such a dire need for it. And really this 120 or whatever the number may be, individuals that we're speaking of, I think you would have seen the stats that would suggest that there's a high percentage of those individuals who really need a specialized housing program that either doesn't exist or there is just very little of it. And we're speaking of supportive housing programs with support staff in place working within the building. We're talking about harm reduction. We're talking about managed alcohol programs. So we have an integration of programs and the bricks and mortar that's really needed here. The province is familiar with the need as well. And I think there are ways in which, whether it's an appendix to the existing work of the housing strategy, or if it's more around developing a shared understanding between both levels of government and answering some of those questions of how do we make this happen. I think that still has to be teased out, but I think we all would welcome the municipality's participation in continuing to develop that understanding, so that when all of the communications between the province and the city on this file occur, that there is a common language being used.
I think I'll just add a little bit to that as well, just on the Affordable Housing Action Plan, in that we may think of that plan as related to housing specifically. However, it can also have a variety of feedback on other facets of municipal operations that fall outside of strict zoning and land use issues, from transit to crime prevention to where we plant trees. All those will be invited into that discussion. So it's an astute question, Councillor Hickey, that the municipalities' focus on this will be multifaceted, and it will not be exclusive to housing specific.
All right, Councillor Harris.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a quick point on that. I think this council will remember a motion that I brought forward to call on the city manager to request that the province basically create a Department of Urban Affairs and Housing, because I do believe it is our urban centers, especially our Tri-City realities, that bear the brunt of most of these problems. We know that municipalities like Quispamsis, Rossey, Hampton, Grand Bay, they do not have the infrastructure that we do in place to work with people who have certain realities and certain barriers to their lives, whether it be addiction or housing or employment. And I still stand by that. I know the city manager has taken that request to call on the province, and I know that this council referred it to priority setting session. He's working with that on numerous ways, but I do believe that we still need a Department of Housing and Urban Affairs so that there is a minister who is responsible to answer these types of questions and answer the deliverables and the requirements that our communities face. So just to plug that and to remind council of that, as well as to try to give some encouragement to these folks here who are working on the front lines, that we're trying to use our platform to provoke and to call on the provincial government to put forward meaningful change that we need. So thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor. Okay, it looks like that is it for us. So I want to say thank you again. We look forward to continuing our relationship with you as a partner in reducing homelessness in the city of St. John. You know, it's no surprise we have, as Councillor Harris mentioned, we have more homeless people here. That we have a lot of infrastructure available, and we have amenities for them. So we do tend to get inner cities tend to have the homeless issue more than the outlying areas. And I guess, you know, from my perspective, I think that like I said, we want to continue to be a partner. We want to continue to do what we can to work with you. We are the closest government to the people, so that makes a big difference. We see it, you know, so and our citizens are important to us, so we want to make sure that we're part of the team. So thanks for coming in. The information, I know the information is always changing, and it is nice to have you into council, and it would be nice to have you in every so often, just to sort of give us even a little bit of an update on it, because it's a subject that everyone is concerned about, no matter where you live. You know, it doesn't matter if you live in an outlying area, you still know that there are homeless people. You may not see it, but you know that it's there. And I think everybody does want to somehow impact it. So like I said, I do appreciate you coming in and updating us, and don't stay away as long again. Come a little sooner. Thanks so much.
Great work.
Okay, so I would need a motion to receive and file the report. Councillor Radwan, Councillor Killen on the question. All in favor? Contrary minded? Motion carried. Thanks again. Okay, City Clerk, next item.
Yes, Your Worship. Next, we have item 13.1. It's the 2022 General Fund and Utility Capital Budgets, and the Chair of the Finance Committee will be introducing this.
Councillor Sullivan and Chair of the Finance Committee, over to you with your favorite subject.
Thank you, Your Worship. Good evening, Your Worship, councillors, staff, and St. Johners. Tonight, we have before us our capital budgets for both our general fund and our water utility. These budgets have been created by our departments and previously discussed at both the Finance Committee and 2 weeks ago at Council. The budgets follow our long-term financial plan and our suite of financial policies, including the policy relating to borrowing and debt reduction, along with the policy allocating 85% of the budget to renewal of infrastructure and 15% to new infrastructure. Ultimately, these budgets will invest $43.6 million into St. John, while only borrowing $9 million. This will continue the reduction of our overall debt while still investing significantly in our city. Thank you to the staff who have supported us throughout this process. The contributing staff are throughout the organization. As you can imagine, creating the budgets is a big task. Should the budgets pass this evening, it will allow us to get the tenders to market right away, which will get us our best bang for the buck while the market is still competitive. In discussions with staff, there have been no further inquiries from councillors regarding the budget since introduced formally to council 2 weeks ago. Staff are certainly prepared to answer any final questions tonight. There are 2 budgets, so there will be 2 budget motions. I'd start by moving the recommendation in the kit with regards to the general fund capital budget.
Seconded by Councillor Hickey. On the question? All in favor? Okay, Councillor Radwan has a question. Hold on. Councillor Radwan.
Aaron, I had a very quick comment that I wanted to make. So I was a little bit on the fence, and after looking at everything and looking at our council priorities, getting this gas tax money is just so exciting. First of all, it's just so exciting. And there are pockets of money going out there for sidewalks, for roads, for parks, for playgrounds, a little bit of money is here and there. And I was on the fence about Rocco Park because it is $1.8 million, so a lot of money. But I think it is going to look fantastic. It's not only great for our residents, but also great for tourism, which has a huge impact on our residents. So I am voting in favor of this tonight. And I do want to say that I'm not 100% on board yet for the solid waste plan that's coming forth before council. I hope to be on board before the motion goes through. But, you know, money that's sitting there for these waste cans, waste bins can be reallocated if council decides against it later on. So anyway, so I'm going to be voting in favor. I think everybody's going to see a little bit of things in their areas that they like, and that's the biggest reason why I'm supporting it.
I think you're right about that, Councillor Redwine. Councillor Harris, you had a question?
Just again on that quick comment, Your Worship, I think, you know, I've heard a lot from citizens over the past 3 months around issues like traffic calming, around safety for pedestrians, people who are using, you know, alternative modes of transportation, whether that be the need for a walker if you're an elderly person or, you know, somebody who's on a bicycle. I think it's important to note that an entity, the corporation that is our size, needs time to turn those corners. We're still waiting for certain things like the phase 3 of Move SJ to be approved so that our staff that Councillor Sullivan so well pointed out have put forward a really good effort here to make sure that as much of the bases are covered on expenditures for infrastructure and things like this that hit home and fit with the council priorities. It just takes time for us to move on these things and to move these big ships. So I would just ask for people to have patience. I know that I'm going to get calls and I'm going to get emails. How could you support that? It doesn't have A, B, and C, but I would just say, look, A, B, and C are going to come. We know our staff are on it. This budget and this approval is based on the trajectory of the last couple of years and needing to, you know, to optimize and come forward on an efficient manner for our infrastructure. So it's not that we're missing it. It's just that it takes time to move the needle. So just a caveat, but I'm certainly in support. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harris. I'll add my 2 little cents worth here. What I loved when I read this is that for the General Utility Fund capital budget, it says to focus on renewal of assets and replacement of vintage 1800s infrastructure. So think about that, and so you'll see a lot of inner city streets today. You cannot build and have your storm drain go into the sewer line. That's illegal. But in the uptown area, 150 years ago, because some of our pipes go back to when Abraham Lincoln was the president, they were all together. And in fact, when I had mine changed, I have a flat roof, and a flat roof collects a lot, just like a parking lot, a lot of water. It was going right into the sewer system. You don't want to overwhelm that system, especially as we have climate change on the go right now. So we need to ensure that our system can still perform. So that's the big thrust of separating those storm lines out. Anyways, that's enough talk from me. I'll call the question. All in favor? Contrary minded? Motion carried. Thank you, team.
Thanks, Your Worship. And so the second motion would be to move the recommendation in the kit with regards to the utility fund capital budget.
Okay, so I have Councillor Redwine and Councillor Hickey on that. On the question on that one. In favor? Contrary minded? Motion carried. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Sullivan, for all your work on this as the chairman of the team.
It's a team, Your Worship.
Yeah, that is true. Thank you. City Clerk, next item.
Yes, Your Worship. So next we have item 15.1 under general correspondence, and this is a letter from the YMCA requesting to present to St. John Council, and staff recommendation is to refer this to the clerk to schedule.
Okay, Deputy and Councillor Ogden on the question. All in favor? Contrary minded? Motion carried. Next item.
Next, we have items that were added to from the as supplemental agenda items. So we have 16.1. It's a fundraiser charity event for Sophia Recovery Center. And the request is to allow the clerk's office to purchase tickets for council members.
Okay, Deputy, Seconder, Councillor Hickey on the question. All in favor? Contrary minded? Motion carried. Next item.
Next item is 16.2, and this is from Prude, and it's the Cultural Diversity Awards tickets.
Okay, Deputy and Councillor Sullivan on the question. All in favor? Contrary minded? Motion carried. Okay. Next item.
And next item was added from Committee of the Whole. It's a recommendation with respect to the lease at the City Market with Deanna Dempsey. And the resolution is resolved that the city enter into a lease for stall 2 and ancillary spaces at the City Market with Deanna Dempsey operating under the business name Lebanon on the Go, under terms and conditions set out in the lease submitted with MSC 307/2021. And further resolve that mayor and clerk be authorized to execute any necessary documents.
Okay, sounds good. I need a motion. Councillor Redwine, do you have a question? Motion? Okay, good. Councillor Harris? Do you have a question, Councillor Radwan?
I'd just like to make a quick comment. I hope that everybody's going to get into Lebanon on the Go when they open in the City Market. I think this is a fabulous business to be having in the City Market 6 days a week, and I look forward to going in and seeing them myself.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor. I agree. It's delish. I've had it as takeout. On the question? All in favor? Contrary minded? Motion carried. Next item, Common Clerk or City Clerk?
The final item, Your Worship, 17.2, it's with respect to sale of land, Spruce Lake Industrial Park, and it's a motion from Committee of the Whole that the city enter into an agreement, purchase and sale with Frank's Mobile Equipment Repair Limited, and the form is attached to MNC 2021-312 for the sale of PID number 552-35469 in Spruce Lake Industrial Park, and that the mayor and clerk be authorized to execute the said agreement, the purchase and sale, and all documents necessary to effect the land transaction.
Deputy, you're moving that? Okay. And Councillor Killen on the question? All in favor? Contrary minded? Motion carried. All right, I will take a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn, Your Worship.
Harris and Councillor Hickey. Thank you, everyone, this evening. We're out a little bit early, almost 8 o'clock. Yeah, it's great. Appreciate all the work everyone put into this, all to staff for all of the reports that come, and to the councillors who read their kits. They are usually fairly extensive, so really appreciate it. So I'll call the question. All in favor? Contrary minded? Motion carried. See you in 2 weeks.